Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Moss, host of the SOS, the Shout Out Show. Hope you're having a wonderful day, a blessed day. And if it's not a blessed day, doggone it, good thing you got tomorrow. Today, brothers and sisters, we're going to be talking about something rather sensitive. Um, a report was released today. There are a lot of things going on in the United States, just so you know. But a report was released today that said we had the highest level of drug overdoses in the history of America. The highest level, over 100,000 people died as a result of overdose. One of the leading culprits in overdose is the substance or the drug fentanyl. Now, today I'm going to kind of talk about overdose, but I want to humanize it a little bit. I'm not talking about people's willingness to take drugs. I'm not talking about people's decision making. I'm talking about the culture, if you will, that allows this type of thing to happen. We're a very medicated United States of America. Today's show is titled The United States of Overdosed. It could have been the United States of overmedicated, but I stuck with overdose because that had a very, very impactful sound and a very, very impactful focus. Because here in the United States, we have been dealing with this thing for an extremely long time. I felt like today, maybe we could just scratch the surface on what is it that's actually going on with people having overdoses. When I say overdoses, these are people who are dying from overdose. We're not talking about the actual graphic or the demographic or even the numbers of people who are involved in heavy drug use. Now, I'm not going to sit here and give you a story about I was an addict or something like that. No, I have been affected, just like many of you have been affected by the drugs in our communities, drugs in our schools, drugs in our own families. Hell, drugs in our mosque, and drugs in our churches, and drugs in our synagogues. I think we, brothers and sisters, should have a real conversation. I'm going to peel back some things about what I've been dealing with and how I've come to this conclusion. And I'm going to share some things you may not know, but I'm going to talk about this whole culture, how we got to this point, how we got to over 100,000 people dying, brothers and sisters, not just dying, but overdosing on drugs, which is a whole different allegory of how you get to death. So look, I'm going to ask everybody first, before we talk about this during the break, please make dua for those that we've lost, but make dua for the families that have been affected and the families that have been left behind. You see, when you overdose and you leave that way, it's not just a death. It's not a very linear thing. People have been going through things. Emotions have been engaged. This is just an end result. And the cool part about it is the end result, it doesn't end. It leaves people with questions. It leaves people with anxieties. It leaves people with sadness and depression and just overall feelings of guilt about how I could have helped this person. Now, like I said, this is not a judgment show. And I would say, if you feel me going off that way in this presentation at any point in time, jump in the comment box and say, hey, preach, we got to move it back to the center. But I'm going to tell you some stories as an entertainer, as a person who's been affected by drug use in their family. And I'm going to explain that process. Because at 54 years old, what is startling is that this number that came out, this 100,000 people that have overdosed here in the United States, what is startling, brothers and sisters, is that we've known along the way. People have drawn lines in the sand about drug use in the United States. But it was not about drug use in the United States. It was about the availability of drugs. So you see, we've gone from the street corners and the dark alleys of getting little packages of dope and things like that and cooking it up with a spoon to being able to go to the local pharmacy and get a prescription. And nobody looks at you funny about your prescription. And you become more and more addicted to the prescription drugs, not the dirty drugs we used to talk about with the needles, things like that. Like we have this right here. This is a real conversation, and I'm going to frame it as best I can as a family conversation. This is Preacher Monster ShOUT Show. We're talking about the United States of overdose. We'll be right back. Satana, go ahead and start the show. All right, welcome back, everybody. Again, this is the ShOUT Show, the SOS. Before we get started today, I want to make sure that I give some shout outs to the people in the comment section. Our ShOUT Show family, the devoted ShOUT Show soldiers. Let's go ahead and bring them on. First of all, we can give a shout out to Sister Ree. Sister Ree is the ShOUT Show craft services director and show dietitian, always making sure that the food and the subject matter is good for consumption for our brothers and sisters. Sister Ree, we appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Peace and blessings to you, your husband, and your son. As always, thank you. Next up, my main man, Altaf Rashid. We call him 6 o'clock, straight up, straight down. This brother's always here on the show, making sure he tunes in to get his portion of the SOS. Altaf, we appreciate it. And let me add, before I say that, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. But Altaf is also on the show. He's our official Canadian ambassador from the show. Altaf, this show ever gets big, you're still going to be the official Canadian ambassador, and so will you, Ree, and JT. I'll find a spot for you as well. Next up. Okay, next up we got JT. Better known as Johnny L. Thomas. Thank you so much, brother. We appreciate you for coming on the show. You know, this thing doesn't happen without you. And I always talk about foundations when you start building things. JT has always been a foundational part of my life and everything I've done as a comedian. It's very, what are we going on, JT? 30 plus years of just knowing each other, knocking around. And it's just good to have him and his family as a support system and just people around me that are just good people for the sake of being good people. Peace and blessings to you and the family. You know how it is, brother. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Next up, we got Sister Sonia Salahuddin. Where's your husband at, sister? I'm just messing with you. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You beat Brother Bilal on the show. God bless you. Tell him we talked about him badly. No, I'm joking. Tell him we said, well, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And thank you so much for coming back to the show. We appreciate you. And we can't forget, of course, our consultant producer, Sister Satana Whitfield, without whom I could not stand in front of you with my hands like this, moving around freely, brothers and sisters. You know, so you gotta give a shout out. As my mom said, you gotta get a drummer song. So we're gonna give her a shout out, Sister Satana Whitfield. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and get started. The title, The United States of Overdose, brothers and sisters. It did not come from the recent report that came out today about over 100,000 overdoses in the United States. It underlies that there's a culture here in the United States that has been embedded to the point that we see normalcy with certain parts of addiction and availability of drugs. This story, brothers and sisters, for this particular segment of the ShOUT Show, begins for me the early part of this year. Let me tell you what happened to me the early part of this year while I was out running, jogging, exercise. I experienced a very, 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 very bad pain in my knee. And it would not go away. My knee would lock up. It was somewhat of a meniscus tear. Then I was involved in a car accident, and it made the meniscus tear worse. As part of my rehab, according to these attorneys that I was dealing with, who shall remain nameless, they gave me a big box of drugs. Of course, they were salve for the knee, but they gave me a lot of pills. And these pills and this pill, and as you know how it is, when you start scanning the Q code, and it tells you all of the side effects of the pills and things like that. I began to get extremely worried. In fact, brothers and sisters, I began to get scared because I felt like many athletes that when you have an injury, you are dealing with emotions about serviceability. And the last thing you need to do when you're having emotions about serviceability and functionality is that you give drugs that help you forget about serviceability and mobility and functionality, if you will. And I was scared to take the pills. In fact, I don't know if the insurance people listen. I never took the pills. I threw them out. I didn't take one of them because I didn't trust the availability. The fact that a guy told me, yeah, you just take this pill, take this pill, take this pill. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't even ask me what I've been taking. You take this pill, take this pill. And I got nervous. And admittedly, brothers and sisters, I threw all the pills out because that's the way I roll. But let me give you something deeper, brothers and sisters. What was even deeper was the fact that I've always feared addiction. I've always feared being hooked on a substance. I've always feared anything that could slightly alter what we call our natural human excellence, our sober reasoning. And so for that, literally, I don't even like to take Tylenol unless it's a serious emergency, like I'm not doing well. And then it occurred to me that some of my greatest heroes, who I've talked about on this very platform that we're on right now, were addicts. Billie Holiday was an addict. Charlie Parker was an addict. John Coltrane was hooked on heroin. And we talk about this culture of music. Now, this is in the artistic space. But we talk about this culture, and I said, why is it that we accepted that? Because we felt like they weren't junkies, that they weren't addicts. We felt like somehow, some way, outside of their addiction, they could contribute to society. That somehow, some way, we could look at them differently because they could do something beyond their addiction. Now, I'm old school. I remember before there was crackheads, we used to have junkies. And the thing about a junkie that we could deal with was at least, the junkie was willing to work a little bit to get that high on. The crack addict does not work. The crack addict will steal and come back and steal again. These are the facts. But even in that space, brothers and sisters, the sick part, even on my behalf, is that we delineated that there was a crackhead and there was a junkie and there was an addict. And somehow, some way, we put spaces of differentiation in between them, not understanding that emotionally and even physically, they were sick. So I was watching this report, and they put up a map, if you will. They put up a map, and you guys know where I'm going with this. We've lost musical icons in our generation due to drugs. We lost Prince due to fentanyl. We lost Michael Jackson to propofol, medications that you can't get anywhere else. Controlled substances that are so strong, you have to have so many releases and sign-offs. And here we find them just in the midst of society. Ironically, they say out of every 100,000 people, 90,000 people were overdosing in the state of West Virginia. You would say, wow, the state of West Virginia is small and concentrated, but it lends itself to drug culture. It lends itself to a drug awareness, brothers and sisters, whereby this becomes the thing that numbs you from the reality around you. It's easy to talk about addiction. I've seen it with friends. I've seen it with family. And I think, and I've said this about the addict. If there's any addicts out there, I'm not trying to disrespect you, but I'm not trying to disrespect you by not saying what it is. Every addict knows that they are the most selfish person in the room. Hands down. The most selfish person in the room. And I'm not even talking about heroin addicts. I'm talking about sex addicts. I'm talking about alcoholics. They are the most selfish person in the room. And what we have now is a pharmaceutical culture that rewards the most selfish people in the room by making these drugs available to them, by creating a culture of doctors who have now redefined, brothers and sisters, redefined pain management by giving them these drugs. Before it was fentanyl, which is described as multiple times more addictive than heroin. Before there was fentanyl, you had Vicodin. You had all of these things. You had methadone. You had all these type of things meant to numb you from pain, but did it really do that? Because I'm going to tell you something. No, it doesn't matter how much you hurt or how numbed you are from pain. The reality is always going to be there, waiting around the corner, ready to jump out and let you know how it is. And now we've gotten into this space, brothers and sisters, and this might hurt a lot of people's feelings. But this comfort for the addict, this now revisited spirit of no, not send them to prison, we need rehab, has now created a whole new culture of people who don't even have a fear of what their actions could lead them to. You see, back in the old days, the great saxophonist, Frank Morgan, beautiful guy, incredible saxophone player. He was supposed to be the heir apparent to Charlie Bird Parker. And he loved Charlie Bird Parker. He emulated Charlie Bird Parker all the way even down to the heroin use. And instead of him being the heir apparent, this musical phenomenon, he wound up kiting checks, trying to support a drug habit, and wound up in San Quentin. Now, when he came out, he was peaceful. But he said something to me that I will never forget. He said, "Is it a sad statement about society that I have to go do 6-7 years in the hardest of places, which breaks you from addiction, but breaks you from addiction because it breaks you totally?" Even now, brothers and sisters, we have a culture that is turning its head on drug use in America. And as sure as I said these things about these facts in this report that came out, because we have short attention spans, I would say that American attention spans are shorter than the time it takes to shoot up, inject, and nod out. Because people don't care. I would say, particularly now, and I would, I guess, guesstimate, postulate, hypothesize, and you could do the same thing, that with the pandemic, brothers and sisters, the level of hopelessness, the lack of connection increased the relationship with addiction. Is it amazing, brothers and sisters, that you have people who, in the middle of a pandemic, the addiction is so strong that they would risk themselves to go out and get a fix. Now, I'm going to tell y'all something. We celebrate legal marijuana. We talk about legal marijuana and CBD and all those type of stuff. And okay, all right, I got it. But is anyone aware of the history of marijuana in America? The generations of young men, particularly young Black men and young Latinos, who are locked away for life for something now that's legal? Could it be the United States is behind in its address of hard drug use? I used to do a joke, brothers and sisters, about how people over in Amsterdam handled the drug problem. They had addicts over in Amsterdam, brothers and sisters, and what they did, instead of castigating them and make them seem like they were dirty or outcasts, they identified the addicts and the addictions. And what they did, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but they told them And to get away from the habits that you usually have to employ to get the drugs, we have the drugs. We'll cook it up for you. And they actually cooked it up for me and injected it in cigarettes. And these people are allowed to go back in society. And, I guess the amount of heroin was controlled. But in Amsterdam, they said at least you can be a functional citizen. That these addicts were still able to work. It seems far-fetched. It's almost like Amsterdam in The Wire. But somehow it does have some reality. It was the idea that even though you're dealing with addiction, we're going to work on you having some dignity. And that dignity may be the thing that turns it around when you say, I need to get off of this. Here in the United States, when we talk about addiction, the first thing we are not talking about is dignity. It's dirty. Joe Biden, Donald Trump, all those people have failed you, America, because they knew that this was a fact. We didn't need, I don't know about you, but we didn't need a report to say that 100,000 people overdosed in the United States. You can look at the trajectory of how people deal with one another. The absence of care, the absence of empathy, the overwhelming aspect of apathy of people, leaders, brothers and sisters, who don't want to deal with one another. You have one congressman that just got censored because he had a video, brothers and sisters, of himself killing another congressperson and attacking the president of the United States. And this man, brothers and sisters, not that he was on heroin, he is not, or fentanyl, he is not. He is on a different type of addiction. Arrogance. So let me throw this one out here. One of the leading parts of addiction that we don't talk about is arrogance. I've heard all the talk. Oh man, I can handle it. Oh, it's just a little, I just need a little taste. Who are you talking to? You're not talking to the person that's trying to tell you not to do it. You're talking to the drugs. And for those, I would throw this out here, for those who sell the drugs, I'm not going to give you some big religious treatise. You know what it is. And for those who sign off so people can get the drugs, you're no better than the person who was on the corner back in the 80s during the crack wars. You just figured out a way to make it a lot more cleaner. And for all the politicians back in the day, the John Bonners who wanted to lock up black people for selling weed, brothers and sisters, selling weed, but now you're making millions of dollars because you got a marijuana dispensary. That's what's wrong. The 100,000 people that are not here, brothers and sisters, are disposable. In the business and the language of corporations, they're called externalities. Means they are a means towards an end. They are externalities. And as long as we allow the powers that be to treat them, the politicians, the pharmaceutical companies, the drug dealers, as long as we allow them to treat them as externalities, next year it won't be 100,000. It will probably be double. And the thing that'll be double is the apathy. The metaphoric symbol of people just shrugging their shoulders. Clearly, brothers and sisters, we have a problem. And they said, we just kicked the can down the road. Is it kicking the can down the road or is it kicking the spoon down the road? How can we even sit here and think about how we can address people and talk to them when they can't hear us? When you're sitting in the room, again, and the person who's the addict is the most selfish person in the room. And if you can't bring them something that they can use and manipulate, then you have no use. Then you have no value. Constantly, brothers and sisters, even in prisons, you have addiction. You have guys who are strung out in prison. Preach, how could it happen in prison? Why wouldn't it happen in prison? You have a captive audience with absolutely no hope of anything. They're dealing with the depths of despair every day. Here's something to get you know. Put it right here. Put it right here. Snort it up. Smoke it, whatever you're going to do. Because in the end, brothers and sisters, the reality, as I said, the reality is that the reality is always going to be there. And as we talk about our politics, even we talk about our religious presence, know, brothers and sisters, that there are a whole generation of people that, damn it, they can't hear you. The drugs are louder. The needle is amplified. The fentanyl is free flowing. The spigot for the alcohol, clearly that spigot and that fluid is louder than what you can present. And we're not necessarily in a place where we can even stand up and say, stop. Because in our own way, we've been culpable. I've been the guy that laughed at the guy who was the wino on the corner, not understanding the pain of the wino or the junkie. Literally, one of my favorite comedy heroes, Richard Pryor. I used to say, well, Richard Pryor is a coke addict, but he ain't no heroin addict. He gave us jokes that tell us that he was killing himself. And we laughed along. We said, God damn, that Richard Pryor sure is funny. I still listen to John Coltrane with the understanding that in some of his albums, he was addicted to heroin. And Miles Davis, and Charlie Parker, and Billie Holiday. And I buy their albums, and I lie to myself and go, well, at least they made great music. Yes, I'm saying it here on the Shout Out Show. I'm a hypocrite. I am a liar and a coward to the realities around me. But I'm honest, and I try and be better. But I have to be totally truthful and transparent that I'm scared. That 100,000 people could perish in a year due to overdose, not COVID. Because the drug use is not something that's celebrated in groups other than groups of people who are also addicted. So there's 100,000 people that perish, brothers and sisters. They did it in closed spaces. They had shows on Netflix about people who overdose. Paramedics that run to find people with the narcanone, to hit it in their chest, to bring them back to life after they overdose. And we call it entertainment. We call it a programmatic choice. Netflix calls it an entertainment offering. And we watch it. We watch the first episode and the second episode. And even in that space, largely we become addicted. How can we help the addicted? Well, hell, we're addicted. So I'm going to wrap up here because I know we have a lot going on. And I hope, brothers and sisters, that I wasn't out of pocket. I know we have some comments. So Tom, let's bring on some of the comments. Walaikum assalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, brother Eric. How you doing, brother? I appreciate you tuning in on the show as always. May Allah bless you and your family. Thank you so much. We got my mom. My eyes are not bad. Unfortunately, monetary profits wise, doctors are the worst drug dealers, and the way they dispense drugs with little penalty. This is true. And I'm saying this from a personal point of view, brothers and sisters. I don't condemn the addicts. I condemn the system. I don't condemn the addicts. You know, because if you have something and you present something to somebody and inside they're broken or they're compromised, they're only going to do that thing. You know, I think on the show said something about shaitan. The nature of shaitan, the nature of Satan. It's not that Satan is a bad person. That if you presented something good and something bad, Satan's going to choose something bad. And if there's only something good, he's going to turn it into something bad. It's not about decision making. It's about his nature. He can't help it. That, brothers and sisters, is the first form of addiction. And the arrogance is that I do have a choice. I can turn it around, even when you can't. The absence of truth. So that's my show. Let's go ahead and get to some sponsors and get out of here because I got a lot of stuff to do today. So I want to give a shout out to BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. If you don't want to go to the website, you can call 1-888-496-6845. Again, that's 1-888-496-6845. Thank you so much. And we also want to give a shout out to Bayan Islamic Graduate School. Again, that's Bayan Islamic Graduate School. If you're looking for a quality master's or doctoral level program, you want to check out Bayan. Go to banonline.org, offering programs in Islamic leadership, Islamic studies, and also Islamic education. And they have one of the best programs, brothers and sisters, the Masters of Divinity with a focus in Muslim chaplaincy, which is exploding. Not that I'm telling people, hey, it's a lot of Muslims in prison. There's a lot of Muslims in prison, and they need service. They need your service. So thank you guys so much for putting up with me for this half hour. So I appreciate you. Anything that said that was positive comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything that was not positive or in error that comes from me and my own nuts, pray for your brother. So that's our show. We will see you the next time. Tomorrow, inshallah, will be a little bit lighter. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shout out show. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Well, team, we've come to the end of yet another show. And I have to say, I had a good time, and I hope that you had a good time as well. Listen, at this part of the show, we have no more show. I could literally sing a song saying we have no more show. However, to spare all of us that embarrassment and chaos, I'm just going to say, please join us tomorrow here on the Shout Out Show, Monday through Thursdays, and every first Saturday, we do our Saturday Spotlight. Here we are again, 5 to 5:30 on the Central Time. And of course, we're going to do our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock p.m. And of course, that would be 6 o'clock on the West Coast. So, time for you to go, because it's time for me to go. I think I will do that song. Thank you for coming to the show. Thank you for coming to the show. That's all the lyrics I wrote. But you get the idea. See you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum.